and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Okay, you've heard me talk about sleep cream the last several weeks. Sleep is one of, if not the most important element in being able to function day to day. And most of us, including me, do not get enough quality sleep with the amount of daily stress or insane schedules that we're all keeping. Here's what I found to help me sleep better: sleep cream. It's not a drug, it's not a prescription, it's a cream. I just rub it on when I'm ready to turn in for the night, and within a few minutes, it helps me relax and allows my body to do what it is supposed to do: sleep. Take my word, I am sleeping great when I have time for it. Sleep cream is all natural CBD with essential oils and a great lavender scent that I can't recommend enough. Try sleep cream for a couple of nights and see if it works for you as well as it did for me. If you don't sleep better from using it, sleep cream will refund your purchase and you don't even have to return it. Totally risk-free. Go to sleepcream.com. That's sleepcream.com. Sleep, CREME.com. And as a bonus, use code November24 at checkout to save $24 off your first order. That's November24, all one word, at checkout. Get your best sleep ever with Sleep Cream at sleepcream.com. Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight we are joined by former White House National Security Council spokesman, Deputy Assistant to President Trump, and veteran whose new book, The Biden-Harris Betrayal: Weak and Woke on the World Stage, is out now. Please welcome John Ullyot. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lara.
You have this book, and I think it's fascinating because I think a lot of people want to know more about the intelligence side of things, the national security side of things. Tell us about the book and why you decided to write it and why you decided to write it right now.
So thanks, Lara. Thanks for having me on. So we're a big fan of your show, and obviously we're pleased to work in support of you from the 2016 campaign onward and serve your father-in-law in the White House, et cetera. So back to your question about how we decided, or how I decided to write the book, is that very early on, people don't remember this, but in the first part of first 3 months or so, actually all the way until Afghanistan, we could talk about Afghanistan in a little bit, but can you believe that Joe Biden's, his approval rating was over 50%. Remember, he did this meeting, I think in May, with Putin.
Shocking, yeah.
2021, and everybody was sort of saying, hey, the adults are back in the room. And so those of us who were on the National Security Council staff supporting President Trump in everything that he was doing, and we could talk about the Baghdadi raid, the Soleimani strike, everything he was doing with China, everything that he was doing to keep peace in the Middle East, moving our U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, everything that he was doing. If you saw on day one, and everything from the border on from there, is that what I started to do at that point is I started to chronicle just how the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of all these failings that were happening from day one. And then I decided to kind of put them into a book because a lot of people forget. And what it is, it's a collection of 50 essays that go into great detail about all these failings of the Biden administration, or Biden-Harris administration, because she obviously said that she was involved in every decision.
Yeah, so Joe told us that too the other day. Yeah, he was very happy to. I'm sure Kamala was thrilled that he reminded us of that. But yes,
exactly. Yeah, she was thrilled. So the point of the book was basically just, and it runs through the last 3.5 years. I think the last essay was after they did the coup, and we could talk about that more with Kamala in June, right before right after it was going before the Republican convention. But when we were up with you all in Milwaukee, remember it was like 2 days after the convention ended that they gave him the boot off the ticket, wasn't it? So anyway, bottom line is that this book is a collection of 50 essays that go through mainly on the foreign policy, national security side, but it also talks about stuff like what happened with defense under Lloyd Austin and under Harris and Biden, remember where he went AWOL for about 6 days and he was totally off the grid?
No one told us. We found out after, right, John?
Yeah. It's a disaster. And I mean, imagine if that had happened in President Trump's White House. And so anyway, so people forget about those. Let's say, just run through a couple of others, is very early on, one of the things that prompted me to start to chronicle these were, I don't know if you remember, but the first envoy that Harris and Biden sent to China is their first meeting of any U.S. representative from their administration to go over to talk to the Chinese was none other than John Kerry. And it was not to talk about great power competition, not to talk about trade, not to talk about South China Sea and how we need to keep that independent. It was to have him go over and talk with them about climate change. Can you believe that?
Oh
That was
my God.
that was the first envoy that they sent over
One
there.
of the most, yeah, that's right. And look at who is the most offensive in terms of their pollution in the world. It's China and India, if I'm not mistaken. So it's outrageous, John. The whole thing is crazy.
Outrageous.
Yeah, I love it that this book is out though, because look, I think that there's so much smoke and mirrors that goes on. Obviously, with the mainstream media is basically the marketing arm for the Democrat Party at this point.
Completely.
They do not give you the full breadth of information when it comes to the Democrat candidate. And of course, they tend to lie and escalate things when it comes to Republican candidates. We all know the song and dance that they do over there. But these things have real implications, and they can really become big problems for the American people. There's so much I want to get to with you, but really we're here in the heart of the last couple weeks of this election.
Right.
And with everything that's happened in just the last 6 months, sometimes it's easy to overlook all the craziness. One of those things, of course, is that the Democrats, their whole party just swapped out the sitting president with Kamala Harris. This is, of course, John, in the least democratic way. This goes against everything that is foundational to who we are as a country, that we, the people, are supposed to vote in terms of our representatives. Can you give me any insight? Because I have a lot to say about it, and there are a lot of Americans who are upset about it, but we don't hear enough about it. I'm wondering, what are people in D.C. saying while all of this is going on? Because I have to imagine there are some people out there, even those who voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be in that White House, who probably look at this and they go, probably one of the worst things we've ever seen. And certainly, again, goes against everything American.
Absolutely, Lara. And actually, President Trump said it just this past weekend with Maria Bartiromo. He was talking about how he said, look, this is the most undemocratic. I mean, everybody's talking about defending democracy, and they're talking about how Republicans and how your father-in-law is a threat to democracy somehow. Meantime, they move their candidate off after 14 million voters voted for him in the primary, and just because he had a terrible debate. And look, you just see, I think that President Trump said it over the weekend that actually people are saying that Kamala is a lot worse than Biden is as a candidate, just if you look at how she's avoiding the press, et cetera. But to your question in terms of what was happening, talk about undemocratic, is that and this was happening probably, well, it started about 3 or 4 days right after the debate. And remember how Jill Biden was saying something like, "You did it, Joe, you did it. You answered every question." And it was just really like she was talking to a 5th grader. Right?
Yeah. Oh, bless his heart is what we say in my home state of North Carolina to stuff like that, John, just so you know.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely right. So anyway, and then you just saw it kind of rolled downhill, and Kamala Harris, she even right after the debate said, "Oh yeah, no, he's the I see him every day. He's as sharp as a tack." Remember that? Sharp as a tack.
Running circles around the interns in the White House. Like anyone ever believed that for a second, John? Please.
That's right. And exactly. And then now, if you look at the campaign, you bring it up, Lara, that you have we've only got 3 weeks to go until the actual election. And if everybody looks at, so she has the same policies to defend about as Joe Biden would have if he were at the top of the ticket, because she was now, as you point out, she said that she was the person who was with him, and he reminded us of that she was an integral part of all of his decisions. So she has to defend that record, but she also has to defend 3 other things. Number one, she was involved in this anti-democratic coup where they took him out, and so she needs to defend that. She also needs to defend the fact that she, in the Senate, before she got on the ticket, had the most liberal record in the Senate and wanted to, she had literally more, she was a senator from California, originally from San Francisco, and there's really just a structural issue. I mean, it's really a political, and this is why she's hiding from the media, which is that that it's a matter of political physics, Lara. You know this as good as anybody does, is that if you are ever elected to a citywide office in San Francisco, then it is a political physics uh, normality that you will not be able to win any nationwide race. And that's why they're hiding her and her record from the media, because if you get elected, you have to be way out. I actually grew up in San Francisco,
Mm.
and it's amazing. That used to be a town where it was a clean city. You had firefighters, you had police. It was a really kind of a blue collar town, and it was beautiful right on the Pacific there. And if you look at what the Democrats have done to that town really in the last
Tragic.
40 years, I mean, it's amazing. And so she has to defend that record and her record in the Senate. So, and then she's got to tell us why she hid the fact that Biden was really that he was non compos mentis for the last 3.5 years. And so, talk about dishonesty. So that's something that really, that whole coup that you talk about where they took him out, really showed that not only did they get a candidate with more baggage, but she now has to defend why she was number one responsible for covering up the fact that he couldn't do the job.
Well, and that is the thing that gets me all the time is if you're a Democrat voter, and thank goodness I've never had the pleasure of saying that I'm a Democrat voter and probably never will.
Amen.
Amen. If you're a Democrat voter, what you have learned over the past like 3 months since the coup happened, because that's what it was, John. What you learned is that this is a party who is so dishonest to their core. They have lied consistently, day in, day out, for years about Joe Biden and his fitness to be president of the United States. We were all calling it out back, 4 years ago during the 2020 election, saying something's off about Joe Biden.
Right,
I don't know that we can have this guy as president. And lo and behold, here we are now. So they're willing to lie to you about any and everything. But on top of that, it's not just the lies. It is how dangerous some of their failures have been. And they have failed epically in so many different ways. You talk about this in your book. You detail the play-by-play of the foreign and domestic policy failures that have brought Joe and Kamala's presidency to its current state, which is, again, it's a disaster. But maybe you could give us some of what you think are maybe the most egregious highlights of those failures, because they have been plentiful, John, to say the least.
Absolutely. And that's why this is an easy read, because what it is, once again, 50 essays, and each one of them is about 1,000 words, about 4 pages. And so what you do is you can just actually, instead of reading it cover to cover, they're grouped by subject. So you have about, let's say you've got nine essays on China, you've got maybe 7 on Ukraine, you've got maybe 8 or 9 on the Middle East, and you've got 4 or 5 on the woke and weak military under Lloyd Austin. And so each one of those is a story that we could talk about. Let's just go through a couple of them. Number one, well, we talked about Kerry being the first envoy there to talk climate change. Another one, when we're talking on China very early on, is that the first meeting that they had, I don't know if you all remember, Lara, if you remember, I think it was, or I know it was in Anchorage, Alaska, but I believe it was in March. So this is 2 months into the administration. First time that the Secretary of State and Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, were meeting with their counterparts on the other side of the Chinese Secretary of State and the Chinese National Security Advisor. And what happened there is that they, how they have a camera spray that comes in and says everybody's making nice and they're shaking hands, etc. And then they'll just take the pool spray, and then the media will leave, and then they'll actually have a discussion. So they're doing the handshake and whatnot. And Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan say, "Hey, it's great to be here in Alaska. We're glad we're hosting you here, and we're looking forward to a robust exchange." And then while the cameras are rolling, they turn over to their 2 counterparts from China, and the Secretary of State from China sat there for literally 13 minutes and just gave a lecture to Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan about how we were a racist country. And they actually turned what all the George Floyd and all the business that Biden and Kamala were running against just 6 months prior to that, back in 2020. And they said, see, you yourselves have said that you're a racist country. And so how are you going to reconcile your past? And this is and Tony Blinken and Sullivan just nodded along to this. And this is something that, and they said, well, we have our failings to own up for, and we're trying to kind of make up for our historic record. And so they let themselves be lectured by the Chinese, who meantime have 2 million Uyghurs in
Right.
prisons, labor camps over
Crazy.
there. And these guys are lecturing them. I mean, can you imagine if that were Pompeo and my
Oh
former
my,
boss O'Brien,
would
if
have
they
gone very
started,
differently, John.
yeah,
I think it would have gone very
exactly.
differently.
Worked out very, very differently. So that's,
Yeah.
I mean, we go over another thing. We talked about Lloyd Austin. I would say, boy, there's so many people forget that. Remember when Joe Biden went and he flew over and did that quote unquote surprise visit with Zelensky to Ukraine, and that even CNN, the liberal media, called them out because they had these fake air raid sirens. I don't know if you remember that, but this is
Ah,
when they were doing this walk outside where Zelensky and Biden always has those aviator glasses on,
yeah, of course. Yeah,
and
got to
they're
play the
doing
role.
this walk outside there, and then they had these fake air raid sirens that they wanted the media to capture, and there was no threat whatsoever. There was nobody at all, no incoming anything from Russian jets or anything, but they had to have that, and it just shows how much of a farce this was, where
Yeah.
Biden is just. And it just goes through so many of those. We even talk about some of the corruption with Hunter Biden, because that's
Mhm.
something that that's clearly something that Joe Biden was skating away from, was his own involvement with that, and just everything else in terms of their identity politics, their hiring of KJP and Pete Buttigieg and a bunch of other people in their administration, hiring them and basically saying, "Hey, this is the first African American woman, the first gay." Secretary of Transportation. Nobody cares. That's why
Who
we love.
cares, John?
No cares. I mean, nobody
Who
cares. That's
cares?
why. And there's never, under President Trump, did he ever make a deal about that. Instead, he said we want to have the most qualified people, and that's it. So very good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we should all want. If nothing else, this book I think is a great reminder for all of us, because you do forget a lot of these things. God, there's been so much, John, that's occurred over the
Right.
past 3.5 years. It's almost hard to keep track of all of it. So thank you for actually, getting it in a book version for us to read. I'll suggest out there to a lot of people, maybe you want to buy this book for a friend of yours who's on the fence over the next 3 weeks, and just kind of like, oh, I got something for you. Maybe take a gander at this next time you're on a plane. Just, float it out there, because once you're reminded of these things, it really starts to make you wonder what on earth is going on. We know Joe Biden has been at the beach quite a bit. This guy's been on a lot of vacations, more so than anyone retired I know. And again, he's still the sitting president of the United States. I hate to remind him. Do you think there are any things that maybe Joe and Kamala have done that more people should be talking about or criticizing them for doing? Because I feel like they certainly have. We know they have the media on their side, but there are a lot of things that maybe immediately don't get the attention they deserve, that those two have done. Anything come to mind on that front? Obviously, Afghanistan was one of the biggest, most epic disasters and embarrassments for America, but any thoughts? Hey, ladies, wouldn't it be amazing to support a skincare company that shares our values and celebrates faith, family, and freedom, and proudly stands behind conservative causes? Well, I have found the perfect skincare brand, and it's called Nimi. Nimi offers simplified daily routines that cleanse, brighten, protect, and help fight the key signs of aging. You can literally just clear out your entire cabinet and replace all your miscellaneous products with an effective routine from Nimi. Nimi offers clean, effective skincare proudly made in the USA that stands strong against the woke progressive beauty companies that back anti-American causes. Nimi has luxurious skincare for all skin types, offering cleansers, toners, moisturizers, serums, and more. I personally love Nimi's clean line, as it offers high-end, clean skincare products that are free from fragrance and other chemicals that may disrupt your skin's natural microbiome. Build a custom bundle and save up to 20% off your routine. Plus, use code LARA for an additional 5% off. Visit NimiSkincare.com, that's Nimi skincare.com, to elevate your routine with America's skincare company, or click the link in my bio to save big on your order using code LARA today. FDN firefighter Daniel Foley assisted in rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero. But Daniel couldn't have known then that his heroism would cost him his life more than 18 years later. His death, like so many others, resulted from 9/11 related illnesses. caused by the toxic dust that formed when the Twin Towers collapsed. Victims and first responders are still suffering and dying from 9/11. Yet children in this nation are growing up unaware of America's darkest day. The Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is helping educators teach children about 9/11. Tunnel to Towers 9/11 curriculum units have scripted lessons, background for teachers, and activities for students. They're based on first-person accounts and designed to meet many academic standards. The 9/11 Institute offers the Discovering Heroes book series, a speakers bureau, a mobile exhibit with 9/11 artifacts, and memorial scholarships for the children of the Foundation's program recipients. Help our nation keep its promise to never forget. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at t2t.org. That's T2T.org. Thoughts?
Sure. Well, Afghanistan, once again, that was an issue where we were at the National Security Council supporting President Trump, and he had a glide path for the exit of Afghanistan where we could have kept the Bagram Air Force Base. We would have kept it with about 2,000, 2,500 troops, just under 3,000. And instead, what happened was Biden and Harris said that she was the last person in the room when
Sure did.
he greenlit this whole idea where we actually pulled our troops out before pulling our allies and people who had worked for us out there. And also, it never would have fallen to the Taliban in general. You would have had the Taliban working with the government at the time. Instead, the Taliban took over so many cities there, and that was something that went on. So that's a good to point out. And President Trump as well, back in his just this weekend in his interview with Maria Bartiromo, he said that Putin never would have gone into Ukraine were it not for this botched withdrawal of Afghanistan. And I'd go even farther, because the president doesn't point out that President Trump is the only president who was elected this century on whose watch Putin did not invade a neighboring country. So
Right.
It was 2008 under George W. Bush. He invaded Georgia. 2014 under Obama, he invaded Ukraine, took the Crimea. Did zero under President Trump because he feared President Trump, because he knew that President Trump actually would back up his words with actions. And he looked at the way that President Trump dealt with, let's say, Qasem Soleimani, from one of the biggest things that he did right when in the last 2 years of his presidency. And we can't talk about classified information, but it has been reported in outlets that President Trump was one of a number of presidents who had been given a chance to go after some of these top leaders, but the others said, no, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to really take the strike. Whereas he said that he got that intelligence about Qasem Soleimani, and he said, look, there's a big risk here, but we're going to take it because this guy's responsible for killing. He's the head of the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, and he was responsible single-handedly for about 2,000 deaths of Americans in Iraq,
Right.
because he gave those shape charges, remember, that blew through the armored Humvees, and none of the Iraqi militants had those, but the Iranians under Soleimani came in. And so anyway, President Trump, good on him. He got Baghdadi, he got Soleimani, and so that's why Putin feared him, everybody else feared him, and there wasn't a peep out of anybody from Hamas or the Iranians. You saw how he dealt after that Qasem Soleimani. People forget about just how good and what the contrast is in their record. I'd say one last thing is that I write in the book about, I was a Senate staffer. I ran comms for the Armed Services and the Veterans Affairs Committees for 7 years. And so we actually worked with, or my bosses on those committees worked with Biden at the time. And so Biden left, obviously, in 2008 to run for president, 2008, 2009, when he was elected as vice president, rather. And back then he was a joke. But he was at least compos mentis. Everybody kind of, but he was somebody who was kind of Scranton Joe, and he was just a guy with a kind of a temper behind the scenes, but he was with it mentally. And then if you look at what happened to him by 2016, that's when Obama in 2015 said, sorry, it's not your time, Joe, saying that to your own vice president. And then he tried to talk him out in 2020 of running. Do you remember in 2020, actually 2019, he said, hey, it may not be your time, Joe. And so it's the third time now Obama kicked him off the ticket. So Obama himself 3 times has talked Joe Biden out of running. And that's what you have from this anti-democratic process. But hey, we could go on for a whole day.
I know there's so much. Well,
stories.
that's why it's so great that I think you wrote this book, John. One of the things that I think people I personally don't feel like has gotten enough attention right now is the fact that we just had an ISIS terrorist or an ISIS sympathizer who was caught in the United States, who was planning apparently to commit some sort of an attack on election day here
Right.
in the United States. This guy came over the southern border. Like we know, over 350 people on the terror watch list already have. Those are the ones
Absolutely.
that were caught, John. This administration, under the watch of our great border czar, Kamala Harris, who let, close to 20 million people probably come into this country.
Right.
But when you go back to Afghanistan and talk about the vacuum that we left there, the fact that we got out in this terrible way, like you just described, we left our allies out to hanging out to dry. The Afghans who had been, the people who were there helping the soldiers and the U.S. soldiers and had been working with us, their lives were on the line. I don't know
A
ever
lot
what
of them have
happened
been
to them.
killed. A lot of
Yeah, a
them
lot
have
of
been
them were
killed.
killed. We just left it wide open. Donald Trump famously talks about this story all the time. When he became president, he actually went to his top brass in the military and said, hey, what's the story with ISIS? How do we get rid of them? Like, what do we need to do? How long
Right.
will this take? You've probably heard this story. And they're like, sir, well, we have a process we go through, and it could take a year, 2 years, maybe longer. We don't know. We have to call you every time we're about to do an attack and do this, that, and the other. And he said, wait a minute. What if I just tell you to go out there and do what you need to do? You don't need to call and get an approval from me for anything. You guys are the military experts. You do what you think is necessary. And they said, sir, that would be great. So he said, just do what you got to do. John, it took 4 weeks to eradicate ISIS. When you took the
Right.
handcuffs off the United States military, Donald Trump did that. The fact that we got a guy in our country right now who is part of ISIS, ISIS is back. Who allowed this to happen?
Unbelievable.
Joe
Well,
Biden
we know.
and Kamala Harris. No,
Yeah.
John, why is no one talking about this?
Well, everybody needs to talk about that,
Yeah,
and that's why everyone needs to focus on just we know what's happened on inflation, we know what's happened in terms of the economy, we know the skyrocketing crime. But if you look at the world instability right now, Lara, we are on the brink of nuclear war in
Oh,
two areas in the world right now: Middle East with Iran, and
yeah,
obviously in Ukraine, where the Ukrainians are. There's been no solution. That's when President Trump said that, look, that he's going to put an end to that conflict right away, because there have been literally 1 million people killed on both sides. Well, 500,000 killed on both sides, but 1 million killed and injured on both sides in that war, and there's no solution whatsoever. But now you have Putin, who's threatening to use tactical nuclear weapons. You've got a standoff here in the Middle East where the Iranians were broke when President Trump left office. They had literally
right.
$7 billion in cash or in assets, and now they've got over $100 billion, because what happened was Kamala Harris and Joe Biden instantly they took off all the sanctions on the sale to China of Iranian oil to China. So they've now built up to $100 billion. That's why they're able to fund Hamas. That's why
Did
they're
we
able to
also pay
fund
him $6
Hezbollah.
billion for a prisoner swap too?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you more stories. One quick story from the book that you reminded me about is this is literally last December of 2023, is Kamala. So the Houthis, remember that the Houthis were attacking our Navy vessels,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing that right in the Red Sea there, and they were being very brazen. They never would have done that under President Trump, obviously. And so she flies over to the region as these Houthis were attacking our vessels. And she flies to Dubai, right on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula from the Red Sea where we're being attacked. And just like John Kerry, she gives a lecture on to an international audience on climate and the fact that we're spending another $3 billion of U.S. taxpayer funds. Then she gets on her plane, comes back to the
Right.
U.S., and doesn't say anything about the Houthis. Instead, she talks about climate there. This is just not even 12 months ago. And so everybody needs to look at this weak record, and it's just embarrassing. I mean, that you'd have anybody, Jimmy Carter would be embarrassed at this record right
Right.
now.
No, exactly. Exactly. And by the way, the one word answers to whenever Joe and Kamala both, because they've both done it, have been asked about these problems around the globe, whether we're talking about Putin, whether we're talking about Iran, whoever it is, and they say, what is your message out there to Iran? Or don't. John, what is
Right.
don't? What
Yeah,
are we
don't.
talking about? How about you're going to face fire and fury, the likes of which the world has never seen? Donald Trump said that. And guess what never happened? You never saw any issue with Kim Jong-un of North Korea because Donald Trump put him in his place and said, don't even try it. Because
Right.
people didn't wonder what was going to happen if you messed with Donald Trump. They said, I'm not even going to test that option out. I'm going to just kind of keep it, I'm going to rein it in, and I'm going to keep it clean and not worry about anything with the United States. Well, Donald Trump's in there. I
100%.
want people to know where they can get your book and anything you would tell people who may be on the fence right now in terms of our national security and really what's at stake in this election. Because I'm trying to envision a world in which you have a Kamala Harris walking across the DMZ to shake hands with Kim Jong-un. I'm trying to imagine a world in which Kamala Harris has to have a 60 Minutes interview edited to make it palatable for the American people, still with bad answers
Still
after the
edited.
edits. And yet she's supposed to sit down across from Xi Jinping, across from Vladimir Putin. John, are you kidding me? What is at stake right now? What would you tell people?
So first, in terms of where to get the book, if you just go to BidenHarrisBetrayal.com, BidenHarrisBetrayal.com, very easy. You can click right on there, and there's a number of ways. You can go to Amazon, just Biden Harris Betrayal. And so if you're looking, we've got 3 weeks before the election, you can download the ebook version. I believe it's something like $9, $9.99 for the ebook version. And then you can have that, and on a plane, you can just go through some of these. Very easy read, and once again, you can get the hard copy within about 3 days if you order it on Amazon, no problem. And it reached bestseller status in the ebook version in the first week that it was released under Democracy and Leadership. So anyway, it's selling very well. But back to what's at stake here, Lara, because that's really what is top of mind. If you look at the next 3 weeks, if every American says to anybody who's on the fence, look, we know the economy is in the tank, and we know that that's something that's going to get fixed under President Trump. We know the high crime rate is going to be solved in all these Democrat-run cities, that he's going to get law and order like there was before. And then he's going to close the border is top of mind for many people. But then in addition to those three that are very top of mind, you just have to realize what the U.S. image was under President Trump and what it is now, where they are laughing at literally Putin and Xi and even the Ayatollahs in Iran. They're all laughing at us because of how weak we are on the world stage, lecturing people about EV mandates and about climate. And then look at just what happened with our military, where we went and we have a weak and woke military right now. We're more concerned about the use of pronouns in the military than we are about just making a fighting force. And if you look at this, we can't be a leader in the world when we're challenged all over the place so we can't afford to have another 4 years of this instability on the global stage. That's why we say it's the Biden-Harris betrayal, because they betrayed their office and their duty to defend this country. And we say the subtitle is weak and woke on the world stage. We can't have this weakness for another 4 years, because we just simply won't have a country the way it is now. And we know the way things were under President Trump, when everybody, to your point, who would have thought they were talking about Rocket Man, remember, in the first with Kim Jong-un?
Yeah.
And then here he is 3 years later, walking across, or 2.5 years later even, walking across the DMZ and being the first president to ever have that relationship, where essentially he was bringing peace to that area, where President Obama said to President Trump the day after he was elected, when they were in the Oval Office, he said the number one problem that you're going to face is North Korea. That's the number one threat. Yep. And President Trump, 3 years later, was walking across the DMZ and having a close relationship with Kim Jong-un. So look, this is something, it's night and day. Everybody needs to keep this. We know the border, we know the economy, crime are all top of mind, but let's also see, just as important is the weakness and the wokeness of the U.S. on the world stage under Biden and Harris. And that's just got to stop. And that's just as important as those other issues. And you need to tell your friends about it, and think back to one last thing I'll leave you with. There's an essay there. People forget about remember the Chinese spy balloon?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's forgotten about that. Nobody talks about that. They allowed that to go. This is Kamala Harris and Biden allow that to go and across all of our most sensitive military installations. And that just epitomizes their weakness. And people need to keep that in mind when they go to the voting booth, either early voting or all the way until Election Day.
Amen, John. That's exactly right. That's what we got to do. Go buy John's book, read up, Talk to people about it. Remind them about these things. We all have to be reminded of how bad they are. You can feel it, but John, once you really get into the thick of it with all this stuff, it is outrageous that these people are in the White House right now. We got to get them out. We got to get Donald Trump back there. So, John Ullyot, thank you for joining us here on The Right View. And to everybody at home, as always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. And we'll see you back here next time for more.
And I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Nothing is worse than being on a phone call that drops. Nothing is worse than trying to text someone and you can't reach them because your phone is out of service range. And nothing is worse than supporting these major corporations and companies who don't support us. That is why I love Patriot Mobile. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless network. They use every cell tower out there available to all networks so that they have the greatest 4G and 5G coverage nationwide, and they support the causes that are important to us as conservatives. If you go today to patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump and use the promo code Trump, you will get free activation today. Again, that is patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump. The promo code is Trump for free activation so that you can get a great cell plan and feel good about doing it.